So today I am back again in the wide and wonderful world of STARGRAVE, but this time I'm doing something a little different. When playing STARGRAVE, you'll want to have some baddies for your brave adventurers to go up against. Things like random encounters with local wildlife or roaming space pirates. I wanted to have some really brutal looking raiders to put down onto the tabletop, but I figured since I was already making a couple, I might as well go ahead and make a whole crew. That way I can play against them or as them if I'm feeling more malicious. Hello, my name is Nathaniel, and this is Punic Painting. As I was scrounging for ideas for these raiders, I found these absolutely beautiful 3D printed pieces on Etsy that pretty much matched one-to-one what I wanted. They looked violent and dangerous, covered in bones and scrap metal, but with some unifying militaristic elements that looked like they frequently raided army outposts and scavenged most of their good gear. I gave the pieces a wash to make sure that no residue was left over that would mess with future paint or glue. I don't think this is strictly necessary for 3D printed stuff, but better safe than sorry. I trimmed off some stray bumps and leftover resin pieces and glued all of them together, and soon enough, I had a pretty nice collection of maniacs. I wanted to do some more involved basing for this group, so I needed to paint the minis and bases separately. I had the bright idea of using some milliput to temporarily hold them for painting, and this was a huge mistake. I repeat, I snapped so many of the delicate resin ankles trying to get them out of the hardened milliput. It was an absolute disaster, but a lesson well learned. I gave them all the routine black prime and zenithal highlight with white ink to give me an idea of light and shadow. I loved how these guys looked, but I wanted to try and challenge myself to do something different. I decided to give each model its own dominant color, and to make each of these color the brightest and most eye-popping ones I had in my paint collection. I tend to paint dark and grim, so I think for a lot of these paints this was their first time seeing sunlight. I went with a dark gunmetal gray for the iron boots and the gun frames, and there are a lot of these spiky armor plates across all the minis that I didn't want to look too uniform. So I did some with gunmetal and some with brass to keep things interesting. I added a nice woody brown for the gun stocks, and then I added the big bold color for the coat and helmet. I kept the mixture of the paint relatively thin and let the zenithal do as much work for me as it could. With these bright colors, almost everything needed multiple thin coats to get a good coverage, but I expected this. Yellow was on my list of colors to use, and it is a notoriously difficult paint to work with, so I used a little bit of a cheat. By using warm grays and light khakis as an undercoat, yellow covers so much easier and gives a lot more depth than any other method I've tried. I came back and used a lighter silver for the chains and for the scrap metal bayonets, and a khaki color for all the bones, including the spooky gas masks. I blacked out the vent hose and painted the flesh in a variety of tones to show off this ragtag group from all over the galaxy. With everybody painted, it was time to work on the bases. I cut up some corkboard pieces, some with squared edges and some without. The squared edges would be used to make crumbling walls, while the others would make for ruined chunks of highway. I tried to get a good variety of shapes and sizes so nothing looked too similar, and it would add a lot of visual interest to the bases. I spread out the remaining areas with a texture paste and gave everything a thick coat of black brush-on primer. Usually you want to go thin with paints, but I wanted to fill in some of the texture of the corkboard and make it look a little less porous. I painted the cork a mid-tone gray and the ground with a rich, muddy brown. To add a little bit of flair, I added some graffiti to my walls. For a bit of fun, I made each one a reference to one of my own other projects. Breakout with the pickaxe and Join the Union in blue and red to reference my miner crew that I made a previous video for the channel. A culty eye with the phrase "We Watch" for an upcoming supernatural crew I have planned, and some purple runes for another crew I have in the works. Yes, I will have plenty of STARGRAVE content coming in the future. I glued the minis down to the base with some super glue, and voila, a full crew. So without further ado, let's see the raiders. worked with colors like this before, so it was a pretty enlightening and fun project experience. It's hopefully widened my palette, and I definitely think I'll be thinking a bit brighter in the future. It's a good reminder to try and challenge myself and move out of my comfort zone. These aren't my favorite minis I've ever done, and there's a lot I would do differently, but the experience was valuable just on its own. This was Punic Painting, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. I've got quite a bit planned for the future, including some heavy kit bashes coming pretty soon. So until next time, have a good one.